Extra, extra, read all about it. This is a special video for Life in the 1800s newspapers. Get ready for the best of the best compilation of some of the 1800s newspaper articles that I found especially intriguing and exciting. Saturday, April 28th, 1894, edition of the Garden City Gazette. J.K. Edmiston, former manager of the defunct Walla Savings Bank, was awaiting trial for embezzlement. Mr. John G. Tobin went on a Saturday to withdraw $4,474, but Mr. Edmondson told him he had to wait till Monday, as the sum was a large one and if drawn out might leave the bank short of funds. But the bank permanently closed before that Monday. On that day, Tobin grabbed his .38 caliber bulldog revolver and unobserved advanced upon Edmondson. From 5 feet away, he drew his gun and fired. The bullet passed through Edmondson's coat, barely missing him. Edmiston, who was taken completely by surprise, exclaimed, "My God, what's that?" Looked around, saw his would-be assassin, and started to run, with his pursuer close on his heels. When he reached the telegraph pole at the southeast corner of the building, Tobin again fired at the now thoroughly frightened man, missing him by a few inches. When Edmondson reached the corner of First and Poplar Streets, his pursuer again fired, but as the man was very much excited, his range was very uncertain, and the bullet flew wide of the mark. The chase was continued to the corner of Second and Poplar Streets, where another shot was fired, again missing its mark. Edmondson, who was nearly dead with terror, started as fast as his remaining strength would allow toward the wagon of George M. Lunsford, trimmer for the Walla Gas Company, at the corner of Second and Birch Street, where the latter was engaged in fixing the street light. Edmondson attempted to climb into the wagon, but the owner, not caring to be a target for any purpose, anticipated the move and hastily catching lines, pushed Edmondson back and drove quickly out of danger. The terror-stricken banker then ran around the corner to the Union Baptist Church, where Mr. James Waite, who lives west of the church and who witnessed the finale of the affair, led the man to his house. From here, Edmondson was later spirited away. Tobin, who saw that his efforts were futile, surrendered his gun to some unknown person and was taken in by a large number of citizens who escorted him to the street corner of Second and Main, where he walked quietly home. The case came up for trial at 3 o'clock. Judge Burgess imposed a fine of $20. On the same day, D.W. Prees, H. McCormick, L. Law, and J.W. Harris, 4 soldiers, were arrested for stealing 3 chickens. The same judge, Judge Burgess, fined each of them $50. Mrs. J.J. Henry, who resides near the city on the Offner Place, was wonderfully saved from death by dragging. As she was passing Ailes & Co.'s store, her horse broke rein and dashed along the street and overturned the buggy. The skirts of the occupant caught in the vehicle and was dragged some distance. Although her injuries are not fatal, Dr. Stewart, the attending physician, says they are very severe. The bold wisdom of an old-timer. As Old-Timer jumped into a First Street alley Monday morning to dodge bullets, he thought first, what a providence it was that I was located right by an undertaking establishment. His second thought was what poor marksmen the world of today has produced. Why, in his day, if they were shooting towards Edmondson, they would have got him on the very first shot. Husbands, when you enter the door, the wives, in days to come, will forget to ask for a new bonnet in their eagerness to inquire for the Gazette. Uncertain voyage. In chatting with a party of friends recently, the conversation drifted to the Chicago Exposition, and this called to mind a laughable coincidence which happened at the World's Fair concerning a prominent real estate dealer who lives not 1,000 miles from Walla, a gentleman who is termed as being very jovial. His very estimable helpmate also played a conspicuous role in the comedy. For the purpose of this story, we will call them Mr. and Mrs. Jocundus. The event occurred in the street of Cairo Village, a neck of the woods which was full of allurements, entrapments, and pitfalls at an average price of 25 cents. Mr. Jocundus was heard to express a strong desire for mounting a ship of the desert, to which his amiable spouse stoutly objected. But Mr. Jocundus became not discouraged and took his chance and slipped away while his wife was engaged in trying to buy an oriental rug at an adjoining booth. When he reached the camel department, another lady was there, bartering with Muhammad, one of the drivers, for a ride. Abner, her husband, was there, but he was bashful about the camels. Abner wanted to see the dancing girls, but his wife refused, reminding him that he was a deacon of the church. "Does the camel bite?" asked the lady, who was cross-examining the dealer in rides to detect some flaw in his defense. "No, no, camel, he very belly kind good. His name Ward McAllister. He so polite." "Is he an easy rider?" she persisted. "He ride. He no ride. On car, yes. On bateau, yes. He no ride too big, too grand, too magnificent." "I mean, is it easy for the folks on his back?" "Yes, yes, very easy. Bully, yes. Easy up, easy fall down, easy ride, 25 cent. "You say is kind and gentle, and you warn him not to shy?" "Yes, madame. How could so noble a beautiful lady suspect my camel to be such a devil? How could she?" The reproach in the tone and the compliment in the words fetched her. She gave up her quarter. Mohammed invited her to mount the camel, which she did with much fussing and settling and shifting. Mohammed then turned to our Mr. Jocundus and said, 25 cent, 1/4, hop on." To think was to act, and Mr. Jocundus brought out his money and climbed up. Mr. Jocundus then perceived what he neglected to think of before, that Muhammad, the camel driver, must have mistaken him for her husband Abner. "Grab your lady tight, or she take fall," he said. So Mr. J put his arms around Mrs. Abner's waist. Just as they were promenading down the street, Mrs. Abner looked down and saw a strange coat sleeve encircling her waist. It must be understood that all this time she was sitting with her back to Mr. J, except at such times when she was sitting on him. "Abner! Abner! Where did you get that coat?" She turned around and screamed, "Where's Abner? Unhand me, you brute!" Mr. Jocundus removed his arm, but just then the camel gave a lurch. "Save me!" she shrieked. "You'd like to see me fall, you impudent man! Why don't you hold me?" They clinched. A laughing crowd had formed, and Mr. Jocundus looked up to see Mrs. Jocundus with a gleaming eye and an indignant mane, fast acquiring an opinion of what she characterized as a shameless conduct from her husband. They dismounted the camel. I was now anxiously watching and waiting to see what sort of reception Mr. Jocundus would receive and how Abner might feel on the subject. Mrs. Abner says, "Abner, where have you been?" "I have been," he said. "I have been into the theater and seen the gals dance. I have also been watching you a ride on this here dromedary." Abner turned to Mr. J and said, "I hope you enjoyed your ride. I used to find her pretty good company on a straw ride." And he winked, as a man who had the inside track and knew how to realize on its value. Stories of the Northwest in the Walla Walla Garden City Gazette newspaper, dated October 13th, 1894. The Lost Cabin Mine. Wherever miners congregate in these latter days, mines of great richness, which have been discovered only to be speedily lost, is a subject sure, sooner or later, to come up for discussion, and scores of hardy and resolute men have worn out their lives in weary and fruitless searches for these golden will-o'-the-wisps. No story of this kind is more thrilling or familiar to miners than that of the famous Lost Cabin Mine. Many lives have been lost and years wasted in searching for it, for its mystery, after the lapse of 30 years, remains as baffling and perplexing as ever. In the spring of 1863, Allen Hurlburt, a miner who has gained much experience but small profit in the gold fields of California, found himself in Walla Walla, where he fell in with two miners bearing the names of Jones and Cox. The trio secured an outfit and provisions for an exploring trip to the eastern slope of the Rockies, and after a long and difficult journey, reached the banks of the Yellowstone. Here they built a raft on which they floated down to the Bighorn River. As the country through which they were moving swarmed with hostile Indians, they were compelled to travel principally at night, a precaution which prevented them from getting an accurate idea of the country, and so they were ignorant both of the name and location of the range of mountains, which was one morning they found looming up in front of them. They landed and set to work in a gulch in the side of the mountain. Almost the first stroke of the pick revealed a rich vein of ore. Hurlburt and his companions resolved to spend the winter in developing their claim. A portion of the provisions which they had brought from Walla Walla still remained, and game was plentiful. They felled trees, threw a dam across the creek which ran through the ravine, erected sluiceways, and daily worked their claim with feverish eagerness from early dawn until nightfall. When the approach of cold weather forced them to suspend operations, they had gathered nearly 2 bushels of nuggets and gold dust. The fortunate miners now built a cabin, fortifying it with stockades in which they passed the winter months. When the spring sun unlocked the waters of the creek, they hurried back to their sluice boxes and worked harder than ever. One day, Hurlburt left the sluices to go to the cabin on some errand. He had barely lost sight of his companions before he heard the sharp report of rifles, and Jones and Cox lay dead on the ground. From the top of the tree in which he sought refuge, Hurlburt left his hiding place, hastily collected a small supply of food, filled his knapsack with gold, buried the remainder, and then set off on foot in a direction opposite to that taken by the Indians. He wandered for days through the wild, strange country which he had never seen before, and finally, from the lofty precipice, espied the wide stretch of an open prairie. He struck boldly out over the prairie, and 3 weeks later reached the North Platte River a short distance from Fort Laramie, where he fell in with a band of gold hunters hastening to the newly discovered mines of Montana. He told his story to his newfound friends, and they persuaded him to lead them, if possible, to the claim from which he had fled for fear of his life a few weeks before. The party, which numbered several hundred souls, including women and children, wandered from place to place till winter came on, but no trace or sign of the lost cabin mine was ever discovered. The Three Hills of Gold. A more ancient and still more perplexing mystery is that of the Three Hills of Gold. Some 60 years ago, a party of hunters led by a man bearing the name Peg-Leg Smith were trapping on the headwaters of the Colorado River. They made their way down the Colorado River to the mouth of the Gila, then struck westward over the Colorado Desert, hoping to reach Los Angeles. On the third night after leaving the Gila, the hunters pitched their camp near three small hills. Accident or idle curiosity induced one of the hunters to mount to the summit of one of the hills. He found its top covered with a mass of dark-colored broken rock, plentifully sprinkled with shiny yellow particles in varying size. The presence of gold in that section had not been dreamed of because of its singular appearance, and several pieces of the rock were carried away by the hunters. These specimens were examined by an expert who pronounced the yellow particles to be pure gold. Peg-Leg Smith at once organized an expedition and endeavored to rediscover the hill at the base of which he and his companions had camped so many years before. Before reaching the desert, however, the horses belonging to the prospectors were stolen by the Indians, and Smith gave up the quest in disgust. A dozen years later, the hills of gold were discovered by another white man, only to be lost again. A soldier stationed at Fort Yuma was discharged in the spring of 1860, his term of service having expired. One day, an Indian, with whom he had been on friendly terms, told the soldier that he knew of a place on the desert where plenty of gold was to be found, and offered to guide him to the spot. The soldier hastily collected a small outfit, and with the Indian as his only companion set out for the desert. They returned within a fortnight, and the soldier soon left for San Francisco. In the latter city, he met a number of old miners to whom he exhibited a nugget worth several $100s and a certificate of deposit for $120,000 worth of gold, which he informed his astonished auditors were the result of his visit with his Indian friend to the rich mine in the desert. The Californians instantly offered to fit out an expedition and reward the soldier handsomely for guiding them to the spot. Their offer was accepted, and the party soon started out, but the desert quickly swallowed it, and no one of its members were ever again seen alive. A few years ago, an old wagon surrounded by skeletons of men and horses was found on the desert some distance from Fort Yuma, and this is the only clue to the fate of the party that has ever been discovered. To still another prospector have the Three Hills of Gold yielded up their secret. In 1870, a miner who had been working for some time in Arizona left Yuma for Los Angeles. He followed the old stage road for a time, but in the end resolved to lessen his journey by taking a shortcut. Soon after leaving the road, he found himself in the Badlands, a succession of steep hills cut by deep canyons, which so confused him that he finally lost his way. After wandering aimlessly for a long time, he reached a group of three small hills and rode to the top of one of them to get his bearings. While taking a brief rest before resuming his journey, he glanced to the rock upon which he was sitting, and to his great surprise speedily discovered that the entire hill was a mass of decomposed quartz mingled with nuggets of gold. He emptied his saddlebags of their contents and filled them with the precious ore, after which he struck out for a gap in the mountains, and after a hard journey which nearly proved fatal, succeeded in reaching Los Angeles. The journey ended, he was stricken with fever and lay for weeks at the point of death. When finally pronounced convalescent, he called for his saddlebags and told the story of his surprising discovery in the desert. The ore he brought with him was found to be worth $7,000, and the details of his story proved that Smith's lost mine had again been found. The doctor who attended upon the sick man induced him to agree to guide a party to the 3 Hills of Gold, and preparations were making the trip when the miner was taken suddenly with the relapse and died 2 days later. The doctor has repeatedly fitted out parties to search the region in which the hills are supposed to be, but the search has thus far been in vain. Blood-stained hat. A Gazette reporter one day this week went to the courthouse on business with one of the county officials. In an absent-minded manner, the scribe opened the door of one of the storage rooms instead of the office of the official. The room was quite dark. Hanging on a nail in a corner, an old, dusty, soft black hat could be discerned in the dim light. This piece of headgear had a very strange appearance, and thinking it might have a history, a closer investigation was made. Taking the hat from where it was hanging and bringing it to the light, it seemed to tell a queer story. It was perforated in 8 different places, as if by bullets, and here and there were dark spots upon it, resembling congealed blood. That the hat had been purchased in Walla was shown by the mark, which read, Sam Lesser, Hatter, Walla. Surely here was a relic with history. Upon investigation, it was learned that this battered and besmeared article had been worn by A.J. Hunt at the time he was lynched for shooting a soldier by the name of Emmett S. Miller, Private, 2nd Cavalry, in Rose's Saloon on April 22, 1891. The lynching occurred on April 24th. The apparently unprovoked assault upon their comrades so incensed the soldiers that the death of the culprit was decided upon. Mutterings to this effect had been heard by a number of citizens, and Sheriff M. McFarland, with 2 deputies, went on guard at the county jail, where the prisoner was placed awaiting trial. About 9 o'clock that night, about 40 soldiers left the garrison by some roundabout way. They were well armed with revolvers and carbines and were under the strictest discipline. Upon their arrival at the courthouse, a detail of soldiers were placed around the square, guarding all approaches. The balance of the soldiers marched to the jail entrance. They commenced pounding on the door and demanding entrance. "What do you want?" asked the sheriff. "We want that man Hunt," was the reply. "I won't give him up," was the response from the sheriff. "Very well, then, we will blow up the jail with dynamite." Looking out of the window, the sheriff could discern the forms of the soldiers as they stood ready to obey orders. The ominous click of many guns gave a warning that the watchers were obliged to heed. Thinking to work a ruse to warn the citizens and secure aid, the sheriff said he would open the door. When this was done, the soldiers crowded into the entrance and covered the guards with their guns. Taking the keys from the jailer, they opened the cell door. They took him out to the open air, and their guns spoke. The sound alarmed the people, but when they reached the scene of the tragedy, no trace of the assailants could be found. Their plans had been well laid. Someone picked up the hat of the dead man. It was produced in evidence and afterward hung in an out-of-the-way place, possibly not disturbed till examined by the Gazette reporter. In the 1800s, there were a lot of eligible women in the East who were looking for husbands who lived in the West. She didn't have access today to dating apps and texting and email, so What was a girl to do? You would start a correspondence, looking for a pen pal. The Walla Gazette newspaper decided to help out these eligible ladies. I will be reading to you a series of articles that started in June 1896. The Gazette printed these ladies' letters in the newspaper without their knowledge. Something you would never be able to do today. There will be several parts to this 1800s dating apps, applications, love letters. Each part will feature a corresponding couple that was printed in the newspaper. Make sure you watch the last part because there's a surprise ending. The series is entitled Love by Letter. The following letters have been exchanged in the correspondence school which the Gazette organized. Upon some of these letters may be spun a good story as the writers become better acquainted with one another. It will be interesting to everyone to study the arts employed by the different correspondents to capture their opposites. Even their quarrels will be lifelike. When some of the ladies discover that their notes have been given this publicity, they may consider this rather too realistic fiction. These letters were all the result of a single insertion of the following advertisement in the Cincinnati Enquirer. Lady correspondent wanted, Lock Box 59, Walla, Washington. Covington, Kentucky, May 5th, 1896. Lockbox 59, Walla, Washington. Unknown friend. Having noticed your personal in the Cincinnati Enquirer representing a lady correspondent, as I also am desirous of a gentleman correspondent and friend in the West, I have written to you this day, hoping I may be granted not alone the pleasure, but honor as well of considering you a future correspondent. I am fully aware of the fact that gentlemen justly have quite an antipathy to corresponding with entire strangers, particularly so when of the opposite sex. Taking this fact into consideration, it is no more than just that I should at least give a brief outline of my past, that you may the more readily determine exactly the character of she who is now addressing you. Ohio is my native state, a Buckeye. I am in Covington now, at work. I want to paddle my own canoe, and I did so for 5 years, but to proceed with the description. I am an American, age 23, height 5 feet 5 inches, in weight at present 130 pounds, complexion dark, brown hair, blue eyes. I am partial to good literature, passionately fond of chariot races, theaters. By nature, particularly fond of amusement, yet force of habit and association have had their effect, and I impress anyone as serious and retiring. Through choice, I make few friends. Hoping I may have the pleasure of learning of yourself very soon, I am respectfully Miss C.S. Wesley. Miss C.S. Wesley, 191 Madison Avenue, Covington, Kentucky. Dear lady, the story of your life interests me. You write a pretty hand, and your composition is excellent. Favor me with an early reply. I have a stock ranch a few miles from Walla. I now spend the most of my time in town, leaving 2 or 3 men on the ranch. If I should marry, I will live in town and send my children to school. We have as fine a schools in Walla as can be found anywhere. Maybe this letter is not the kind that should be written to a lady whose acquaintance I wish to cultivate. I suppose it is not. But I have not had much opportunity to learn the arts of polite society. My ranch and my stock have taken my attention ever since I left school. I read the newspapers and occasionally into a book. Awaiting your reply, I, am very cordially, Grant Huntley. In this case, the real name of the lady is withheld so that her relatives here may not be embarrassed. Logansport, Indiana, May 30, 1896. Unknown friend. Seeing your advertisement in the Cincinnati Enquirer, wishing for a lady correspondent, and this is leap year, I thought I would take the advantage of it and write you a few lines answering your advertisement and introducing myself. I am 16 and a student. I have blue eyes and dark brown hair and light complexion. I have relation and friends in Washington and some living in your city. We have a beautiful little city situated between two rivers. The name is Logansport, but it is sometimes called the City of Bridges. If you find this worthy of your answer, I will complete the description of the city in the next letter. Your unknown friend, Emma B., East Market Street. Walla Walla, Washington, June 5th, 1896. Miss Emma B., East Market Street, Logansport, Indiana. Dear Lady, at the post office a few minutes ago, I was handed a number of letters in answer to the Enquirer advertisement. I stepped into this place to open and read my mail. Your letter was so sincere and cordial in its tone that it attracted my attention above the rest, and I take up my pen immediately to reply to it. I assure you in the beginning that I shall await with pleasing anticipation for the description of the City of Bridges. I am none the less interested in the account of yourself and of your relatives in this city. Let me see. Mr. Herman M., who lives on the summit of the Blue Mountains, is the only person I can think of in this locality who spells his name as you do yours. Walla Walla is the Garden City of Washington. It is probably the wealthiest city per capita in the Northwest. This state has one drawback. Its male population exceeds by 37,000 its female population. Think of that. Somebody must do without a family. Some manly heart must beat without response. The foreigner will probably reply, "The brave will win the fair." Very true. It would be more to the point to change the line to read, "The bold will win the fair." There is a difference between boldness and bravery. If you were to come to the Pacific coast, you will discover that our women do not like domestic work. They make good parlor ornaments, but not first-rate housekeepers. The old families have Chinamen to do domestic work for so long that the wives and daughters have forgotten the arts of the kitchen. A false distaste for this work has been created by this system. The women of the Middle States are generally differently disposed. They are industrious and energetic. They are the kind of stock we need out here to build up this country. You may think I write like an old man, but when you see my photograph, you will not think I am very aged. What studies are you taking? Public school, college, or high school? Please to send me the advertisement you saw in the Enquirer or an exact copy of it. I missed that copy in some way. From Indiana to Walla Walla is a long way for papers to go. Yours very cordially, Typo, Box 59, Walla Walla, Washington. P.S. I will give you my name in full when I send you my picture. N.B. I wish you were here to take an ice cream soda with me. Logansport, Indiana, June 12, 1896. Friend, the letter of the 10th received. I never thought how long it would take a letter to get there, and I thought my first attempt of letter writing was a failure. I promise you a description of our city. We claim a population of 29,000. We do not have many manufacturers, although it is quite a railroad center. We have the Panhandle, Wabash, and Vandalia. The Panhandle has a large shop, and one running full-time employs from 500 to 600 men, and sometimes more. We have 3 parks, one of which is not finished. Well, I am neither an authoress or poetress, but I do not think there's a prettier little city that lays out of doors than ours. Now for your letter. I have 3 uncles there by the name of Snively, but no relation by the name of M. blank. My, what an immense male population! No wonder gentlemen are seeking lady correspondence through the Inquirer. I do not see by the tone of your letter that I should think you were aged. You ask what school I go to. I go to high school. My studies are German, physiology, rhetoric, civil government, algebra. I have lost the paper with your personal in, which I regret very much. I would be very glad to receive your photo and name in my next answer. I should have enjoyed your ice cream soda very much if I was there. Have you ever been in Logan? Hoping for an early reply, I remain your friend, Miss Emma B., East Market Street. P.S. I wait your name and photo with utmost impatience. My dearest Emma, you are the only Emma I care anything about, so why can't I address you as above? Your description of Logansport is interesting. It is very different from any western town. In the West, we have few factories. We depend for our living upon stock, farming, and mines. Your account of yourself is so good that I feel as though I had known you for some time. The photographer has not yet turned out my photos. I will send you one as soon as he does. I think your relatives, the Sniveleys, live in Yakima County, do they not? Hoping to hear more about your interesting self, I am confidently yours, Major J. Fred Caseman, Lockbox 59, Walla Walla, Washington. Logansport, Indiana, July 13th, 1896. Friend Fred, now you stop. I'm not old enough to be a deer. I am a fawn. To begin with, I gave you a description of myself and home, and you have never said a word of yourself. I wish for you to state age and description of your home and occupation. You see, the more I know, the better I can write. We had a little of the Wild West here. Buffalo Bill's show was here. The 4th here was so dry that it did not seem like the 4th. Last year they had the fireworks at Riverside Park. This year it was all private affair. Everybody had his own fireworks. For myself, I and some friends took our dinners to the park and spent the day. I was at a county festival and had a real good time last week. I am anxiously waiting for your photo and description of yourself. The grain crops are poor here. I was to 2 threshings last week and had a good time. I have just received a new piece to play on my guitar, and it is just lovely. Well, I must close, hoping to hear from you soon. Emma B. Unknown friend. I desire to make your acquaintance, as was asked of the Inquirer. I am a young lady, 18 years of age, 5 feet 3 inches in height, weight 99 pounds. I am a brunette with blue eyes. My father owns a restaurant, and I am at home. It is called the Bon Bon. I have many friends and go in the best society. Yours respectfully, answer, Miss Jeanette Yeager. Miss Jeanette Yeager, Columbia City, Indiana. Esteemed lady, seeing that you are in a restaurant, I presume that you know how to cook. If there is one thing above another that recommends a young woman to me, is to hear that she understands the preparation of food. The description which you gave is good, but a photograph would be better. Would there be any objection to our exchanging photographs? I will return yours at any time you request it. I will shortly send you an illustrated paper containing my biography. Tell me what you think of it. Awaiting your reply. I am cordially, Charles Schmidt. Friend Charles, your letter was at hand today noon and was glad to hear from you, but sorry you did not give your description and age as I did, for that is what I asked for. I cannot send you one of my photos for a couple of weeks. I am going to get some better ones taken this week. I have a sister 10 years old that is a beauty, also 2 brothers who live at Marion, Indiana. I have a stepmother and a stepfather. My sister and myself live with our stepfather. His name is Louis Smith. He is direct from England. I am of Scottish descent. You asked me if I can cook. I can say yes and be proud of it. I cooked in the Grand View Hotel at Huntington all last summer. I am a dressmaker and a bookkeeper. I graduated in the grammar class 2 years ago. I am cooking at home the last few weeks, for my mother has not good health and our cook left. I also understand music. You send your photo when you write, and I will send mine in return. What is your occupation? I will now close to hoping to hear from you soon. I remain respectfully, your friend, Miss Janet Yeager. May Miller, writing to M. Fisk. June 3rd, 1896. Noticing your advertisement in Saturday's Enquirer, I venture to send you my address, hoping to hear from you. I would also give you a description of myself, only I fear it might be a little premature, so I will reserve my pen and ink portrait for another time. I should like to hear from you, should like to hear all about yourself and why you advertise for a lady correspondent. So long as I am in ignorance of your name, I do not care to give you mine. So if you will write, you may address it to May Miller. Dear friend, it is rather early in the correspondence for me to disclose my motive. A less cautious man than I might speak right out. One reason that your letter impresses me more favorably than others that I have received is that it is conservative and reserved. I should judge that you are more careful about your associates than those women who are so ready to give their names, addresses, and descriptions to a total stranger. That is the very reason that I desire to know you better. I am an orchardist and live on a farm 4 miles from the city. Just at present, I am very busy marketing my strawberries. My cherries are ripening. If you were here, you might drive to my ranch, or wheel there, for the roads are excellent, and become better acquainted with me while tasting my fruits. When I came into town today to sell a load of strawberries to the Walla Produce Company, I found your letter in my box. I herewith answer it before leaving town. I am 26 years old and once lived in a town not more than 300 miles from Warsaw. I notice that you swing a graceful and easy pen. I confession from the start that I am better with a 4-horse whip or a hoe handle than I am with this modern implement of warfare. Whether a lady of such accomplishments as your letter would indicate that you possess will desire to further correspond with a plain fruit vendor will be determined by my future mails. I shall anxiously watch. Lockbox 59, M. Fisk, Walla, Washington. Warsaw, Indiana, June 19, 1896. My unknown friend. I beg your pardon, I'm sure. I had no idea your reasons for advertising were so weighty that you could not tell them to me. You might have retaliated by asking why I answered. I am glad you did not. But all the same will answer without the question. It was simply a very lively curiosity on my part. I had always supposed that young ladies were plentiful everywhere, and if a gentleman desired lady friends, he had only to cultivate them. And I asked you why, because I wondered why you were not content with those friends you knew. Does it not strike you that you are a little hard upon those whom you censure for being so ready to give their names and addresses, etc.? Isn't that what you wanted? I am afraid when you condemn them, you condemn me also. For myself, I can only say my curiosity, though I have a lot of it, never before has led me into anything like this, and I am very glad it has ended so happily for me. I think you will prove a desirable friend, and as we have made a beginning, if you wish it, we will become better acquainted. You have told me so very little about yourself that it doesn't count. I think you will have to begin all over again. One thing I have quite decided in my own mind, that you are or have been a business college student. Am I right? However, with all my powers of imagination, and they are not small, I promise you, I cannot form not the slightest idea of what you look like, so won't you please tell me? You may address me as before. Very truly yours, May Miller. Dear Lady, I am surprised that a woman whose letters exhibit so much intelligence as yours do should be so desirous of knowing the details of my appearance. I should suppose that a person of your evident discernment would think first of the mental tendencies of a correspondent. A next consideration would be his habits, last of all his personal appearance. But I presume that you would not be a woman if you didn't want to know how a fellow looks who is giving you attention. As that is necessary to a woman's estimate of a man, it is well for her to form correct impressions of his person in the beginning. You guessed wisely when you decided that I have attended a business college. Instead of entering commercial life, I chose horticulture and agriculture. I have always been a patron of rugged nature. I am 5 feet 8 inches in height, black hair and eyes, nose slightly inclined to be Roman, eyes deeply set, skin dark. Never was sick a day in my life, and have no sympathy for people who get sick by exposing or abusing themselves. I weigh 158 pounds. I am inclined to be peaceable and will be imposed upon before I resist. But when I am forced to fight, I do the thing in the most honorable fashion, with revolvers. I understand that men stand up and pound one another out of shape when they fight in the East. That custom is barbarous. To shoot a man through the heart leaves him a decent corpse. To pound the body up is horrible. I believe in the West and in Western customs. I lived in the East when I was a mere boy, and the East was good enough for me then. But give me this glorious mountain scenery, this salubrious climate, and this bold and independent people for a home. I hope that we know enough of one another after this exchange of letters for an introduction. How shall it be brought about? Very cordially, M. Fisk. This will be the final part. To recap, the Walla Gazette newspaper in 1896 ran a special called Love by Letter. They advertised in the Cincinnati Enquirer, Lady Correspondent Wanted, Lock Box 59, Walla, Washington. Through this simple ad, they got a lot of ladies from the East wanting to write eligible bachelors in the West. Unbeknownst to them, they did not know that their private correspondences were being printed in a paper. These series of articles caused quite a stir in Walla. Thoughts on love letters. Love letters are always interesting. That has never been more forcibly demonstrated to me than since the publication of this series in the Gazette, in which so many people have expressed an opinion one way or another, which shows that they are being pretty generally read. Although love, like the measles, is of most consequence to those afflicted and to those in danger of contagion, yet it may be fairly presumed that all at one time or another have been obliged to undergo the attacks of Cupid and the perusal of letters written by persons suffering the mental cramps characteristic of love, will, to everyone, recall his own agonies under similar circumstances, and brings back some part at least of that pleasure that's all but pain, which you remember as the thrilling experience of his life. No man forgets the first love letter he received through the mail, how his pulse throbbed at its reception, how he read and reread the address on the envelope, how he recognized the handwriting, how he went into privacy, opened the letter in ecstasy, scanning every line with superhuman happiness, how he kissed the name at the bottom of the page, how he devoured every word of it, then put the letter in his pocket to be studied over at leisure. Dear Sir, I just read your personal in the Enquirer. I would please to hear from you. Please give me full particulars in regard to yourself. I am a widow, 28 years of age, have brown hair and dark gray eyes, weigh 150 pounds. Address, Mrs. J.B. Martin, Chattanooga, Tennessee. I received your letter yesterday, but have not had time to answer it till today. Besides, I cannot go to town just when I want to. I live just 2.5 miles southwest of Walla on a farm of 320 acres, all paid for. There is 50 acres of orchard with some garden tracts. I am 30 years old and a bachelor. My weight is 175 pounds. I am what you might call of moderate build. Men of my age who have passed the sentimental period of life don't take to giddy young girls. We prefer sensible grown-up women. Widows know better how to entertain and adapt themselves to men than women who have never been married do. I would have some objections to a grass widow, because when I would discover a faraway look in her eyes, I might not know whether she was thinking about me or about the other fellow. If it is agreeable, perhaps we might exchange photos. Respectfully yours, Everett Daly. Mr. Daly, dear sir, your letter of the 6th just to hand, and I must say that I'm very well pleased with all particulars concerning you. Kentucky is my native state. My parents are dead. I have a married and also single sister in Kentucky. I will make a visit to them soon. I can give you references in regard to my character. I am glad that I can say that I am not a grass widow. I have not been a widow for only a year, and I must say that I find life rather lonely after having a companion. I will be glad to continue correspondence. Trusting to hear from you soon, I remain yours respectfully, Mrs. J.B. Martin. P.S. I will have some pictures taken. Will send one to you and would like very much to have your photo. July 7th, 1896. Dear Lady, received your letter a short time ago, but have neglected to answer it so far. The rush of harvest work prevented me taking time for it, so I lay aside my work to answer your letter. I suppose you will be awaiting my reply, as it will be behind time. I ask your forgiveness for delay. I assure you I will not be tardy again. I was in the Gazette office the other day, having a chat with my old friend the editor, and to pay up my subscription. He seemed very glad to see me and gave me quite a compliment, saying, "I wish that all my subscribers would pay their bills as promptly as you do." I shall send you some copies of the paper in the near future. An article is running in the Gazette now that is attracting great interest around here, and I believe it will interest you as it pertains to myself. I've been writing so long I forgot it was supper time, so I'll have to close. If only I had your photograph, it would hold an honored place in my dwelling and might someday find a place in my heart. The days will drag while I await an answer to this letter. Yours, Everett. Chattanooga, Tennessee, July 24th, 1896. Mr. Daly, dear friend. Pardon the liberty I take in addressing you as friend. It seems so formal to say, dear sir, so hereafter, if you will pardon me, I will always address you as friend, and I also allow you the same privilege with me. I was delighted to hear from you. Don't forget the paper that you promised to send me. I am anxious to see your paper. You will please pardon this short letter, as I have some work to do. I have been mad all day. The lady that I live with saw your last letter, and she don't like the idea of me writing to a stranger. I told the old lady that I was old enough to take care of myself. I don't think there will be very kind feeling between she and I hereafter, and I don't care, as I am under no obligation to the old lady whatever. Your last letter came to me unsealed. You must have neglected sealing it, or either it had not been securely fastened. I don't suppose other people are so interested in my letters as I am. I'm not sure they would even take the time to read them, but I know I don't want to give them the chance. Do you? I will close for this time. Write soon, and don't forget the address, Frankfort, Kentucky. Yours sincerely, Margaret Martin. P.S. I will send my photograph soon, and I want yours, M. And now for the surprise ending. We exchange photographs. All will be seen by the letters below. Our lady correspondents in the East all demand the pictures of the gentlemen with whom they think they are communicating in Walla Walla. As a matter of fact, nearly all of them are corresponding with one person, and that individual is the Gazette office. He is quite sure that if he should send them a correct photograph and description of himself, the Eastern correspondents would lose interest in the Walla Walla lover, and the racy letters would cease to come. To overcome this obstacle, we selected for them the likeness of the best-looking man in town. He did not give us this picture nor permission to use it. A reporter found it at a polling place on the day of the recent city election. We got a cut made from it. From this cut, we have printed a calling card bearing the name to suit each one of the Walla Walla correspondents. It will be interesting to hear what the ladies have to say after they have seen the picture. The cards were printed as follows. I wonder what these ladies thought when they received this picture. There was never a follow-up article.